Hello, Carl. Great to see you again. And I'm so happy to be back here for another session of our ESG Imperative series. So today we get to talk about why climate change is important to banks. And clearly there are some great opportunities here as well as some risks that have to be considered. When I think about it, I really see banks as the nexus for addressing climate change. Given their role in financing and in capital markets, they have the challenge of looking at climate through their own lens, as well as that of their clients and their vendors and all across the chain, and really what the knock-on effects are from climate in each of those areas, including their own profitability. And what I'm really encouraged by is that we've seen a lot of the large banks come out with commitments for net zero by 2050, and some of them with some interim commitments as well.
Martha, it's great to see you, and also to talk on this very key issue. And as you said, the banks are the nexus of the financing for the economy, and they do run a number of risks, as well as there being significant opportunities in the area of climate change. Firstly, if you look at risks, first of all, it's stranded assets. Will the organizations that they're financing at the moment still be around in the future due to climate change? And then also the reputation risk of financing organizations that are contributing to climate change, whether that be fossil fuel companies or transport companies, etc. And then they have to look at the operational risks of the clients that they're financing, because will those organizations' assets still be able to generate the revenues, the profits to pay back the debts, as well as to service them? And if you look at organizations that have operating assets close to coastal areas, they're all subject to flooding. And you can't move plant and machinery very easily away from areas which are subject to flooding.
So true. And I think that's only one of a number of transition risks that banks are facing as they look at it from their own profitability, as well as what are some of the impacts across the broader economy. And again, what some of the knock-on impacts could be to their clients of curtailing certain types of lending or certain types of capital markets activities. But in addition to some of those business risks, there's also a significant amount of regulatory risk and pressure. We've seen it become a much greater focus recently in the US. I think in the UK and Europe, you've been ahead for a long time. But with recent moves by the Federal Reserve and Treasury Secretary Yellen talking about climate as a systemic risk, there's going to be, in my view, considerable pressure put on banks with respect to climate. So they're going to need to do some scenario planning and some stress testing, again, across their own operations, as well as their vendors and their customers. And unfortunately, while global coordination is a goal, we aren't really there yet. So there are different regimes in different parts of the world. So the banks also have to navigate what are going to be requirements or are currently requirements in their different geographies. Which in my view, that means that they have to get ahead of the policy. They have to do things out of their own volition and not wait for the policies to be put in place or additional ones to be put in place. Again, put in place the data, the metrics, the reporting that are needed in order to both comply with commitments that banks have made and in anticipation of regulation coming in and additional policies coming, because the policies are likely to be very data driven. And it takes time to put all this in place. So much easier to tweak something that you already have in place once you find the final regulation is out than it is to be starting and kind of just be behind everybody at that point. And I think, again, working with that data now and putting in place the appropriate technologies to assist in analyzing that data and putting together the right metrics is absolutely imperative in order to really get behind what is going to be a very big push on climate and already has.
The implementing the technology to source the data to be able to report the impact of their businesses as well as their clients on climate change is key. And as you say, the new regulations are driving everything in that direction. However, we mustn't be all despondent and doom and gloom on this. Yes, it's a lot of work, but there are also opportunities, as many organizations and banks in continental Europe and the UK and also the Far East have shown. There are green bonds that can be used for capital markets activities, green loans. In the Netherlands, for example, some banks are attaching rates of interest and covenants to hitting specific ESG targets for their borrowers. So there are all opportunities. Furthermore, many of their clients need to transition from where they are today to get to a point in the future where their carbon footprint and greenhouse gas emissions are significantly lower than they are today. That needs financing. And so the banks can work with their clients to support them in achieving those targets. And additionally, if they put that information into the public domain, it helps with their brand awareness, particularly with the younger generation, which this appeals to.
I completely agree. I think that's becoming a much more important factor as people decide as customers with whom they want to do business, and as talent decides where they want to be associated, and does a company or a bank that they want to work with share their values, and if not, then that becomes a really important factor. So I agree that there is a key opportunity for banks with respect to customers and employees, and really enhancing their brand as they address climate. And I think another opportunity is that supervisors want to engage on this. So banks should take advantage of that and engage with their supervisors as policies are being developed and rolled out. And I think one other area that I would say is a key takeaway that we might want to impart here is that banks should be looking at their operations and their global footprints, and be taking climate into consideration in terms of what businesses they're in, what geographies they're in. And that could be a real opportunity to have a more agile operation and to spur some economic growth in other parts of the economy.
No, agreed. And taking a portfolio view of their business, as well as their risks and their balance sheet, is a good way of reassessing what types of business they want to be involved in, what type of customers they want to work with, and in which particular geographies, particularly for the larger global banks. And another, as we said earlier, a key takeaway is, yes, climate change represents a risk for these organizations, but also significant opportunities.
Absolutely. And just talking about the risk again, just to be cognizant of the regulatory pressure that is out there and is continuing to come, for all of these reasons, both the risks, the opportunities, and the regulation. This is an area that banks and their boards and senior management really need to be focused on. So thank you so much, Carl. Great to see you again, and look forward to our next session of the ESG Imperative.
Martha, it's a real pleasure, and great to speak to you and to see you as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.